The gathering storm. The massive ring structure of Kepler Station rotated slowly against the backdrop of three distant stars, its docking arms extending like the spokes of a great wheel into the void. Ships of dozens of different species crowded. The approach lanes, from the sleek crystal vessels of the ethereal collective to the biomechanical constructs that the hive minds preferred. In the outer docking rings, where the fees were cheapest and the amenities sparse, a small cluster of human ships sat like forgotten toys beside their alien neighbors. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of her cargo hauler, the Honest Trade, watching a massive Bulkeran freighter maneuver into the premium docking bay beside them. The ship was easily 20 times the size of her vessel, its hull gleaming with the metallic sheen that spoke of military-grade armor and shielding. Through the transparent aluminum of the deck's viewing port, she could see the Bulkeran crew, moving about their business with the confident swagger of beings who had never known defeat. The Bulkerans were impressive creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin that looked like polished stone and arms thick enough to crush steel. Their ships reflected their nature, massive, powerful, and built to intimidate. Sarah had been trading in this sector for 5 years now, and she had learned to read the subtle signs of contempt in the way other species looked at human vessels. "Another beautiful day in paradise," muttered Jake Morrison, her engineer and oldest friend, as he joined her at the viewport. At 45, Jake had the weathered look of someone who had spent decades keeping aging equipment running with spare parts and stubborn determination. His coveralls were stained with the multicolored residue of a dozen different lubricants, and his hands bore the permanent calluses of someone who worked with his hands every day. The Bulkerans are loading military-grade plasma conduits, Sarah observed, nodding toward the activity on their neighbor's ship. "Third shipment this month. Someone's building something big." Jake grunted his agreement. "Or someone's expecting trouble. Word is the outer settlements have been hit hard lately. Pirates getting bolder." The pirates had indeed been active recently. Small raids at first, hitting isolated mining operations and research stations, but the attacks were growing more frequent and more daring. Just last week they had struck a convoy only 2 jumps from Kepler Station itself, making off with enough refined metals to build a small fleet. "Captain Chen to the communication center," came the announcement over the ship's intercom. "Priority. Message from station control." Sarah made her way through the narrow corridors of her ship, past the cargo holds that currently housed a mixed load of Earth-manufactured electronics, Terran agricultural products, and several containers of what the manifest diplomatically listed as cultural artifacts, but which Sarah knew were actually cases of genuine Earth whiskey. The human black market for authentic spirits was thriving among certain alien species who had developed a taste for the complex flavors that only traditional fermentation could provide. The communications center was barely large enough for 2 people, its walls lined with screens and control panels that had been repaired and modified so many times that the original manufacturer would probably not recognize the equipment. Linda Vasquez, her communications officer and navigator, looked up from her console with a frown. "Station control wants all ship captains to report to the main conference center," Linda said. "Emergency briefing in 30 minutes. Something about new security protocols." Sarah checked her chronometer. "Round up the crew. This sounds like it might be important." The main conference center of Kepler Station was a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate the wildly different physiologies of the dozens of species that used the facility. Elevated platforms, pressurized breathing apparatus, and specialized seating arrangements created a complex geometric pattern that somehow managed to feel both inclusive and isolating at the same time. Sarah took her assigned seat in the human section, noting that their area was positioned in one of the less prestigious locations, between the methane-breathing Vortex Collective and a group of silicon-based entities whose names she had never learned to pronounce. The arrangement spoke volumes about humanity's perceived status in galactic civilization. Commander Thax of Station Security rose from the central platform, his insectoid frame gleaming under the artificial lights. The Centaurians were an ancient species, their civilization spanning millennia before humans had even discovered fire. Thax's 4 arms moved in precise, calculated gestures as he activated the holographic display system. Fellow traders and captains, Thax began, his voice carrying the precise, clipped tones that all Zentorians seem to favor. Recent events have forced us to implement enhanced security measures throughout this sector. The holographic display showed a star map of the local systems, with red markers indicating recent pirate attacks. Sarah counted more than 30 incidents in the past 2 months, scattered across a region that encompassed dozens of inhabited worlds and trade routes. The entity known as Admiral Vex has consolidated several pirate clans under his command, Thackus continued. Intelligence reports suggest his fleet now numbers more than 200 vessels, ranging from converted civilian ships to captured military cruisers. A murmur ran through the assembled captains. 200 ships represented a significant threat, more than most planetary defense forces could handle. Admiral Vex had been a name whispered in the darker corners of the galaxy for years, but this was the first confirmation that he had grown so powerful. Station Defense Force is being reinforced, Thax announced. Additional security vessels from the Zentarian Third Fleet and Bulkaran Defense Corps are en route. Estimated arrival time is 6 standard days. Trade Master Gorvek, the massive Bulkaran who served as the head of the Merchant Council, rose slowly from his position. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. What of immediate threats? 6 days is an eternity if Vex decides to move against the station. Current defensive capabilities are deemed adequate for any reasonable assault, Thackus replied with the confidence of someone who had never been proven wrong. Station shields can withstand sustained bombardment from a fleet twice the size of Vex's reported strength. Automated defense platforms provide additional deterrent capability. Sarah found herself standing before she had consciously decided to speak. Commander Thax, if I may. Some of the human ships here have experienced cruise and military-grade sensor arrays. We could provide early warning and reconnaissance support while the reinforcements are en route. The silence that followed her words was broken by what could only be described as polite laughter from several sections of the amphitheater. Commander Thax's compound eyes focused on her with what she had learned to recognize as barely concealed amusement. Captain Chen, is it not? Thax's tone was carefully neutral, but Sarah could hear the condescension beneath the professional courtesy. While the offer is appreciated, I believe our current sensor network is more than adequate for the task. Human vessel capabilities are, shall we say, not optimized for military operations. The laughter was louder this time, and Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. She had served 8 years in the Earth Defense Navy before going into private trade, and her crew included veterans from conflicts that these aliens had probably never even heard of. But explaining that would only make her sound more desperate. Perhaps, rumbled Trade Master Gorvek, the humans could assist with evacuation procedures. Their cargo holds, while small, might accommodate essential personnel in the unlikely event of station compromise. The insult was delivered with such casual politeness that it took Sarah a moment to fully process it. Around her, other human captains shifted uncomfortably in their seats. There were only 12 human ships currently docked at Kepler Station, representing perhaps 60 crew members total. In a facility that housed thousands of beings from across the galaxy, they were a tiny minority that most other species barely acknowledged. Captain Rex Torres of the freight hauler New Horizon stood up slowly. Rex was older than Sarah, a veteran, trader who had been working this sector since before she had arrived. His weathered face bore the scars of a dozen close calls and narrow escapes. Commander Thax, Rex said carefully, I've been trading in this region for 15 years. I've seen what Admiral Vex is capable of. His people don't fight like regular pirates. They coordinate, they plan, and they adapt. You might want to reconsider additional support regardless of where it comes from. Your concern is noted, Captain Torres, Thax replied dismissively. However, station security protocols are based on proven tactical analysis and defensive capabilities. The situation is well in hand. The briefing continued for another hour, covering evacuation procedures, communication protocols, and cargo restrictions that would take effect immediately. Sarah listened with growing unease as it became clear that the station authorities were treating the pirate threat as a manageable inconvenience, rather than the existential danger she suspected. It really was. As the meeting broke up, she found herself walking beside Dr. Amara Okafor, the chief medical officer of the research vessel Discovery. Dr. Okafor was a tall, elegant woman whose calm demeanor masked a sharp intelligence and decades of experience in frontier medicine. "They're not taking this seriously enough," Dr. Okafor said quietly as they walked through the station's main corridor. "I've treated victims of Vex's raids. The man doesn't leave survivors by accident." "Have you heard anything specific?" Sarah asked. "Intelligence reports, crew rumors, anything?" "Dr. Kent from the Xenobiology Survey ship mentioned something interesting," Amara replied. "He was trading information with a Vortex Collective ship captain yesterday. Apparently, several outer system colonies have gone completely dark in the past week. Not raided, not destroyed. Just silent." The implications of that information sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Pirates raided for profit, taking what they could carry and destroying what they couldn't. But systematically silencing entire colonies suggested something far more sinister: conquest. They were interrupted by a commotion near the main docking control center. A crowd of beings had gathered around the information displays, their various forms of communication, creating a babble of sounds that the station's translation systems were struggling to parse. Sarah pushed through the crowd until she could see the main display screen. Emergency broadcasts were coming in from across the sector. The mining colony at Kepler 7 had lost contact 6 hours ago. The agricultural settlement on Kepler 12 had sent a garbled distress call before going silent. Most disturbing of all, the military listening post at Kepler 15 had simply stopped transmitting in the middle of a routine status report. "This is not possible," Commander Thax was saying to a group of senior staff officers. "Our intelligence indicated Vex's fleet was operating in the outer rim, at least a week's travel from this position. Unless," said a cold voice from behind them, "your intelligence was wrong." Everyone turned to see Captain Maria Santos of the human courier ship Swift Current. Maria was young for a ship captain, barely 30, but she had a reputation for being in the right place at the right time, with exactly the information people needed. Her ship was small and fast, designed for carrying high-priority messages and small, valuable cargoes across vast distances. "What do you know, Captain Santos?" Sarah asked. Maria activated her personal data pad, displaying a complex navigational chart. "I just completed a run from the Helix Nebula colonies. Along the way, I picked up some interesting long-range sensor data. There's a massive gravitational disturbance moving through this sector, something large enough to affect hyperspace navigation." She highlighted a section of the chart where the normal space-time curvature was distorted in a way that suggested the presence of many large objects moving in formation. "A fleet that size would create exactly this kind of signature," Maria continued, "and based on the movement pattern, it's heading directly for Kepler Station. Estimated arrival time 18 hours. The silence that followed her revelation was broken by the sound of emergency alarms beginning to sound throughout the station. On every display screen, the same message began flashing in dozens of languages. "All non-essential personnel report to designated safety areas." This is not a drill. Commander Thax's compound eyes were fixed on Maria's data display, his mandibles clicking in what Sarah had learned was a sign of extreme stress among his species. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. "Sensor. Readings suggest at least 300 vessels," Maria replied. "But the gravitational signature is stronger than it should be for that number. Either there are more ships than we can detect, or some of them are significantly larger than typical pirate vessels." Trademaster Gorvek's rocky features had taken on a grayish pallor. "Station defenses were designed to repel perhaps 50 attackers, 300 ships." He did not finish the sentence. Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the same clarity of purpose that had served her well during her Navy days when impossible situations demanded creative solutions. "Commander Thax, I renew my offer. 12 human. Ships might not seem like much, but our crews have experience with unconventional tactics. We know how to fight when the odds are against us." For the first time since she had known him, Commander Thax looked genuinely uncertain. His ancient species had achieved their current status through careful planning and overwhelming technological superiority. The concept of victory through desperation and creativity was foreign to his thinking. "What exactly are you proposing, Captain Chen?" he asked. "Give us access to station tactical networks and defensive systems. Let us coordinate with your security forces. We may not have the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons, but we have something that might make the difference." "Which is?" Sarah smiled grimly. "We have nothing left to lose, and humans fight differently when their backs are against the wall." Before Thax could respond, another alarm began sounding, this one with a different tone that made every being in the corridor freeze. It was the proximity alert, the sound that meant hostile vessels had been detected at the edge of the system. Admiral Vex had arrived early, the human solution. The tactical display in Kepler Station's command center painted a picture that chilled even the most experienced military minds present. Admiral Vex's fleet had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, spread across a front that spanned millions of kilometers. 347 ships, ranging from nimble fighters to converted cargo haulers bristling with improvised weapons, advanced toward the station with the methodical precision of a military operation. At the center of the formation, a massive vessel unlike anything in the standard databases dominated the display. The ship was easily 3 kilometers long, its hull a patchwork of different technologies and materials that suggested it had been assembled from the remains of dozens of captured vessels. Weapon emplacements covered every available surface, and sensor readings indicated shield generators powerful enough to protect a small moon. "That's the Bone Harvest," whispered Captain Torres, his face pale as he stared at the display. "Vex's flagship. I heard stories, but I never believed them." Commander Thax's forearms moved rapidly over his control console, activating every defensive system the station possessed. Energy shields shimmered to life around the massive structure, and automated defense platforms emerged from hidden bays like mechanical flowers blooming in the void. The sight was impressive, but everyone in the command center knew it would not be enough. "Station Defense Force reports ready," announced Lieutenant Crix, Thax's aide. 18 patrol craft and 6 heavy cruisers taking defensive positions. "Against 300 ships," Trademaster Gorvek rumbled. "We need to evacuate the civilian population immediately." "There's nowhere to run," Captain Santos said quietly. "Vex has scout ships positioned at every hyperspace exit point. Any ship that tries to leave will be picked off before it can escape the system." Sarah Chen studied the tactical display with the analytical mind that had made her one of the youngest ship captains in Earth Defense Navy history. The pirate formation was impressive, but it was also predictable. They were advancing in a classic overwhelming assault pattern, designed to bring maximum firepower to bear on fixed defenses. "Commander Thax," she said, "are you willing to try something unconventional?" The Zentorian commander's compound eyes focused on her with desperate hope. "At this point, Captain Chen, I am willing to consider any option that might preserve this station and the lives aboard it." Sarah activated her personal communicator, opening a channel to all human ships in the system. "All human vessels, this is Captain Chen. Emergency Protocol 7, repeat, Emergency Protocol 7. The response was immediate. Across the docking bays, human ships began powering up their engines and weapons systems. Emergency Protocol 7 was something that existed only in the informal network of human traders and explorers who worked the frontier regions. It meant that every human ship would operate as part of a single fleet, with unified command and coordinated tactics. "Captain Chen," Commander Thax said urgently, "what are your ships doing? The defensive perimeter requires—" "Forget the defensive perimeter," Sarah interrupted. "We're not going to sit here and wait for them to pound us into scrap metal. We're going to take the fight to them." She moved to the tactical display and began highlighting specific enemy ships. "Look at their formation. They're advancing in 3 waves with the heaviest ships in the center and fighters on the flanks. Classic doctrine for overwhelming fixed defenses. But highly vulnerable to fast attack craft operating from unexpected vectors," added Captain Torres, beginning to understand her plan. "Exactly. Our ships are small and fast. We can't match their firepower, but we can be where they don't expect us and hit targets they're not protecting." Dr. Okafor joined them at the tactical display. "The Discovery has enhanced sensor packages and communication arrays. We could coordinate targeting information and provide battlefield intelligence." "The Swift Current has the speed to get behind their lines," Captain Santos added. I could create diversions, maybe even take out some of their command vessels. Within minutes, the human captains had assembled in the command center, 12 men and women whose combined experience spanned decades of operating in hostile environments with limited resources. They were miners, traders, researchers, and explorers, but they were also veterans of humanity's expansion into a galaxy that had not always welcomed their presence. Commander Thax watched in fascination as the humans developed their battle plan. There was no formal hierarchy, no rigid command structure. Instead, they operated with the fluid cooperation of people who had learned to trust each other completely. Ideas were proposed, modified, and integrated into a coherent strategy that made use of every ship's unique capabilities. The key is timing, Sarah explained to the assembled group. We hit them in 3 waves. First wave takes out their sensor, ships, and communication relays. Second wave targets their escort vessels and creates chaos in their formation. Third wave goes after the big targets while they're trying to reorganize. What about the bone harvest? Asked Captain Williams of the cargo hauler Prairie Wind. That ship could take on our entire fleet single-handed. Sarah smiled grimly. That's where we get creative. She highlighted a section of the tactical display showing the station's industrial complex. The station has mining equipment, ore processors, and fabrication facilities. We can modify our cargo containers into improvised weapons, magnetic mines, kinetic impactors, even electromagnetic pulse devices. You want to turn cargo ships into weapons platforms, Commander Thax said, his tone mixing disbelief with admiration. We want to turn everything into weapons platforms, Sarah corrected. Cargo containers, mining equipment, even waste processing units. Humans have been making weapons out of farm tools for thousands of years. The principle is the same. The next 4 hours saw a transformation of the human ships that amazed the alien observers. Working with a combination of desperate creativity and practiced efficiency, the human crews began modifying their vessels in ways that no military manual had ever contemplated. The honest trade had its cargo holds converted into launch bays for improvised missiles. Jake Morrison and his engineering team created kinetic projectiles from compressed ore containers, each one capable of punching through the hull of a cruiser-sized vessel. Captain Santos removed the Swift Current's passenger seating and replaced it with additional fuel tanks and a sensor jamming array, cobbled together from entertainment system components and mining equipment. Her ship became a ghost that could appear on enemy sensors as anything from a fighter craft to a battleship. Dr. Okafor's discovery became the fleet's nerve center, its research equipment repurposed to provide targeting data and battlefield intelligence. The ship's medical bay was prepared to treat casualties, while its laboratory modules were converted into manufacturing centers for specialized ammunition. The alien crews watched this transformation with growing amazement. Species that had achieved spaceflight through millennia of gradual technological development had never seen anything like humanity's ability to improvise and adapt under pressure. This is not possible, Trademaster Gorvek observed as he watched human engineers turning mining lasers into ship-mounted weapons. Their technology should not be compatible with our systems. Humans don't wait for compatibility, Commander, Thax replied, his tone filled with new respect. They make it work through sheer determination. As Vex's fleet closed to weapons range, the human ships launched their first wave of attacks. Captain Santos led 3 of the fastest vessels in a high-speed run at the pirate formation's sensor ships, their jamming equipment creating electronic chaos that blinded the enemy to the movements of the other human vessels. The Swift Current appeared on enemy sensors as a massive battleship one moment and a tiny fighter the next, drawing fire from dozens of pirate vessels while the real attack ships maneuvered into position. When the pirates finally realized they were shooting at electronic ghosts, it was too late. The second wave hit the pirate fleet's escort vessels with a precision that spoke of years of experience in asteroid mining. Every human ship knew exactly how much force was needed to crack open a hull, where to hit to disable engines without destroying the entire vessel, and how to use debris as cover while maneuvering for the next attack. Captain Torres led this phase of the assault, his New Horizon and 2 other cargo haulers using their industrial-grade tractor beams to hurl chunks of processed ore at enemy ships with devastating effect. The improvised kinetic weapons struck with the force of small meteors, punching through shields and armor that had been designed to stop energy weapons. But it was the third wave that demonstrated the true creativity of human warfare. As the pirate fleet struggled to reorganize, Sarah Chen led the remaining human ships in a direct assault on the Bone Harvest itself. The attack should have been suicide. The massive flagship carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet, and its shields could absorb the combined firepower of the entire human fleet without significant damage. But the humans were not trying to destroy the ship through conventional means. Instead, they used a tactic that no alien military strategist had ever conceived. The Honest Trade and its escort vessels approached the Bone Harvest while broadcasting false surrender signals, their weapons powered down and their shields at minimum. Admiral Vex, confident in his overwhelming superiority, allowed them to approach close enough to dock. What followed was not a battle, but a boarding action that combined military precision with the improvisational skills of people who had spent their lives working in the hostile environment of space. Human crew members, armed with everything from mining tools to improvised weapons, poured through the airlocks of the enemy flagship and began systematically disabling its critical systems. The fighting was fierce, but brief. The pirates, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower, were unprepared for close-quarters combat against opponents who had learned to fight in zero-gravity environments and confined spaces. Within 30 minutes, the humans had captured the ship's bridge and taken Admiral Vex himself prisoner. The loss of their flagship and commander broke the morale of the pirate fleet. Without central coordination, the attack dissolved into chaos as individual ships attempted to flee or surrender. The station's defensive systems, which had seemed so inadequate against the original assault, proved more than sufficient to deal with the scattered remnants of Vex's forces. In the aftermath of the battle, Kepler Station's main conference center hosted a very different kind of meeting. The same alien species that had dismissed human capabilities just hours earlier now listened with respectful attention as Captain Chen briefed them on the tactical innovations that had made victory possible. The key to human military doctrine, she explained, is adaptability. We don't try to overpower our enemies with superior technology. Instead, we use creativity and unconventional thinking to turn their strengths into weaknesses. Commander Thax rose slowly from his position, his forearms moving in the formal gesture of respect that Zentorians reserved for honored allies. Captain Chen, I owe you and your crews an apology. I underestimated both your capabilities and your commitment to protecting this station. We all did, rumbled Trademaster Gorvek. But you have taught us something valuable about the nature of strength. It is not always measured in the size of one's ships or the power of one's weapons. Dr. Okafor, her medical uniform stained with the evidence of treating wounded from both sides of the battle, stood to address the assembly. Today we learned that survival often depends not on having the best equipment, but on having the will to use whatever you have in ways your enemies never expect. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the various species began making plans for rebuilding and strengthening their defenses, Sarah found herself standing once again at the observation deck of the Honest Trade. The view was different now. The debris field that marked the site of the battle was already being cleared by salvage teams, and new ships were arriving to take advantage of the trading opportunities that victory had preserved. Jake Morrison joined her at the viewport, his coveralls bearing fresh stains from the hasty repairs needed to restore their ship to operational status. So, he said with a grin, what's our next cargo run? Sarah smiled as she watched a group of young Zentorian engineers examining the improvised weapon systems that her crew had created. I think we might be getting into a new line of business, she replied. Apparently there's a demand for human tactical consulting services. In the years that followed, the Battle of Kepler Station became legendary throughout the galaxy. It was studied in military academies, analyzed by tactical experts, and retold in countless variations by traders and explorers who carried the story to distant worlds. But for the humans who had fought that day, the real victory was not the defeat of Admiral Vex or the respect they had earned from other species. It was the proof that when faced with impossible odds, human ingenuity and determination could overcome any obstacle. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity that day. They had learned that humans didn't need the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons to be dangerous. They just needed to be backed into a corner with something worth protecting, and that, as every human knew, was when they fought best.